Today was day 9 in Karen Reed's retrial, and we are going to recap everything that happened in court today and play some of the highlights for you of each person's testimony. Now, before we move on to the recap, I want to take a moment to wish a very special happy birthday to Shelby, also known as Franny, who is a subscriber of the channel, a fan of the channel. We appreciate all your support and encouragement for us, and therefore we also want to wish you a very happy birthday and many, many happy returns. All right, let's move on to what happened today in court. So we started off with Hannah Nolles. Hannah Nolles, we already heard testimony from in day 8, and she was just here to finish off the testimony. Remember, she was the one who ran this conversion between what exactly the ratio is between blood and alcohol and serum versus alcohol and whole blood testing and all that good stuff. And at the end of the day, what she was just trying to show everyone is that what the range of alcohol could have been in Karen Reed's system at around 12:30 in the morning, which was over the legal limit. So that was really all what she was trying to prove. And I think most people watching this trial would kind of agree that Karen Reed was most likely over the legal limit at around 12:30 when she was driving. Now, the thing is that she was not just charged with plain DUI. She's charged with killing John O'Keefe as a result of her DUI. So that's the second part of this, is that the Commonwealth still has to prove that Karen Reed actually backed up her car and hit John O'Keefe. So that is still yet to be seen. Although David United did bring out one point that it could be that Karen Reed drank when she got home at John O'Keefe's home at One Meadows. So it's possible that she drank. And if she drank when she got home, then all these results would be off. Okay, so that was just one doubt that he wanted to kind of throw in there. All right, now let's move on to Ryan Nagel. So Ryan Nagel was a person who drove up to 34 Fairview. He was actually at CF McCarthy's earlier in the night with his then girlfriend, Heather Maxim. Now they are no longer together, but at the time she was his girlfriend. They were at CF McCarthy's and they left around 12 o'clock in the morning. Now he was not driving, Ryan Nagel. He was in the passenger seat, and Ricky D'Antano was driving. We're probably going to hear from him maybe day 10 or later on in the trial. So he got a text from Julie Nagel. Ryan Nagel got a text from his sister, Julie Nagel, who was at 34 Fairview celebrating Brian Albert Jr.'s birthday at 34 Fairview. So we got a text from Julie Albert. Can you come? Sorry, not Julie Albert. Julie Nagel, can you come and pick us up? So no problem. Like a good brother does. He said, no problem. Even though I'm not in charge of this car, it's my friend who's driving the car will come and pick you up. So as he was driving to 34 Fairview, that's when he actually, from the opposite direction where Karen Reed was coming from, they met. Essentially, their cars were about to turn to 34 Fairview at the same time. Ricky D'Antano flashed Karen Reed with his high beams so that she could go in front of him. And she indeed took his offer and turned in front of him. So they're both heading down for Fairview. And what do you know? They both stop at 34 Fairview. So he stops right in front of the driveway, and there was no mention at all of Brian Higgins' Jeep. So this was not really spoken about at all by the prosecutor or on cross-examination. I'm not exactly sure why. I think it could have been brought up very easily, but this really wasn't discussed. So he stopped right in front of the driveway, and right in front of him was Karen Reed's Lexus. So it stopped right in front of the house, and then it moved up a little bit more. He waited a little bit for his sister to come out of the car. He texted her. He texted that we're there. She eventually came out of the house. She went down to talk to them. He opened up his car door to talk to her, Julie Nagel, his sister. And Julie actually invited everyone in the car to come into 34 Fairview for a drink and have a celebration and join the birthday party of Brian Albert Jr. Well, they were not interested. They were already done. They had a long night at CF McCarthy's. They just wanted to get home. So they said no, but Julie Nagel decided, you know what, I'm going to stay at the party and I'm going to get a ride home later with Jennifer McCabe. So they waited for her to get back in the house, and they were pulling away as they were still looking at, as Ryan Nagel was still looking to make sure that his sister got into the house safely at 34 Fairview. And that is when they passed by the SUV, Karen Reed's Lexus. And when he peered inside the SUV, he just saw a woman who we now know as Karen Reed sitting in the driver's seat, and with her hands at 10 and 2. Now, I don't know what the significance of her hands being at 10 and 2. I don't know why that was important to bring out. Maybe because she's getting ready to back that car up. I'm not exactly sure. But that was his testimony, that the dome light was on, and the only person that he saw in the car was Karen Reed. So then that was it. That's all he saw. He waited for his sister to get in. He didn't see any signs at all of John O'Keefe in the car. Didn't see John O'Keefe out of the car. Never saw anybody else but Karen Reed sitting in the car. So that was the direct examination. Then when it came to cross-examination, the first thing that David Yannetti wanted to bring out is that the SUV was driving safely. So it didn't look like Karen Reed was driving and swerving all over the road. She was actually driving safely. And then this part of his testimony came up, which is I'm going to play for you, which I think is very interesting considering what Jennifer McCabe testified to. So remember that Jennifer McCabe testified that when she looked out of that front window, the front door, the first time that she saw Karen Reed's Lexus with this Ryan Nagel's truck behind Karen Reed, she also happened to notice out of the peripheral vision, she noticed some tire marks. So let's hear what Ryan Nagel has to say about whether he remembers any sort of tire marks. So we'll just speed it up just a drop, just to 125 here, and let's see what he has to say.
Yes. The snow was only just starting to accumulate on the grass, correct?
Correct, sir.
And with that little snow on the ground, you saw no tire marks behind the SUV, correct?
No, sir.
In fact, you saw no tire marks in the street at all.
Correct, sir.
Well, you heard it right there that he did not see any sort of tire marks. So right away, again, we're seeing some inconsistencies with the different testimony in this case. You got Ryan Nagel saying that he did not see any tire marks. There were no tire marks. And you do have Jennifer McCabe saying that she did see tire marks. So that was just another interesting point that was brought out during cross-examination. So again, just going over the fact that he did not see anybody else in the car when he looked and saw Karen Reed sitting in the car. There was no music in his car. And of course, he did not hear any yelling or arguing or screaming. There was no noises in the SUV. So it just looked like to everybody that Karen Reed was just sitting in the car alone, waiting, which could actually help the defense in this case. Or according to the prosecution, it could be that John O'Keefe just got out of the car and was walking behind Karen Reed's car, and that's why he couldn't see him. And then as soon as Ryan Nagel sped off, then Karen Reed moved the car up and backed up into John O'Keefe. So I guess according to both theories, could be consistent with both of their theories. All right. So that was essentially Ryan Nagel's testimony. Now, Heather Maxim testified, and there really wasn't too much information from Heather Maxim, more than we heard from Ryan Nagel. Very consistent with everything that Ryan Nagel said. And again, they just went home, didn't see anybody getting out of the SUV. And so that was essentially very, very similar to what Ryan Nagel testified to. Then we had Sarah Levenson on the stand. Okay, so Sarah Levenson was inside the house while she was celebrating this birthday with Brian Albert Jr. Now, she did testify that Colin Albert came and only stayed for 30 minutes to 45 minutes. Remember, the testimony in this case is going to be consistent that Colin Albert left the house pretty much early on in the night. So she's the first witness that we're hearing this from, that Colin Albert was there, but he did leave shortly after being there, only for about 30 minutes, 45 minutes. So she testified that the group, Brian Albert and Brian Higgins and all these guys, and then Nicole Albert and Jennifer McCabe and Matt McCabe, they all came home around midnight. And she didn't really know Brian Higgins before. And she knew of Jennifer McCabe, but they were not close. And she didn't really know of Matt McCabe either. Now, they were all talking in the house, and Jennifer McCabe suggested to her that she just not leave yet, even though it's after midnight. But she suggested, stick around. We're still celebrating and having fun with Brian Albert Jr. We're all celebrating together. We're all together. So don't just leave yet. And in fact, you can even invite Ryan and all of his buddies to come and join the party. So that's what we heard from Ryan Nagel. That's why Julie Nagel came out and said, I'm going to stay here. I got a ride with Jennifer McCabe, and you guys go home. So, Sarah Levinson was obviously part of the group. She ended up leaving with Julie Nagel. So that is what Jennifer McCabe invited also Sarah Levinson to stay, and was telling her, just stay. We'll have more fun if you continue to stay here. Okay. So then when it was time to leave, she left the front door, and her testimony was that she was walking arm in arm with Julie Nagel. Now, she was looking at her feet. She was not looking out. And remember, this is purportedly after, according to the Commonwealth's theory, John O'Keefe was hit and was lying in the front lawn, dying. Okay, so everyone's going to be leaving that house and not going to see him. So Sarah Levinson's story is that she was leaving the house and she was very concerned about her feet. She was looking at her shoes because she was wearing shoes without traction. So she didn't want to slip. So she was looking at her feet, locked arms with Julie Nagel. Eventually, she makes her way to Jennifer McCabe's car. And remember, Matt McCabe was going to be driving. So Jennifer McCabe got into the front passenger seat, and she sat in the back passenger seat. Now, I'm going to play the next clip for you, but let's remember what Jennifer McCabe's testimony was before we play Sarah Levenson's testimony. Jennifer McCabe testified that there was some peanut butter and bread in her car. Now, I'm going to ask you, why? According to Jennifer McCabe, why was there bread and peanut butter in her car? Well, according to Jennifer McCabe, the reason is that she was always driving her kids to all their sporting events, whether it's basketball or hockey. Her girls were all very accomplished sports athletes. So they're always driving back and forth from games. And so they'd have to jump into McDonald's and a Burger King and getting all this takeout food. So she didn't always love that she's getting all these McDonald's for her kids, not the healthiest option. So she decided that she'll have some peanut butter and bread in the car so that occasionally she can offer them a peanut butter sandwich. Okay. So Jennifer McCabe's story was that when the girls got into the car, they saw this peanut butter, they saw this bread, and they started making fun of Jennifer McCabe. They're kind of like, teasing her about this bread and peanut butter and, things like that. So that was Jennifer McCabe's story. But now let's hear what Sarah Levenson has to say about the peanut butter and the bread in the car and why she thinks there was that bread in the car. All right, let's move ahead a little bit to right there.
As you were leaving, was there any conversation or joking going on?
Yes. So Matt actually forgot his jacket inside, so he went back in. And
now that's an important part also, by the way, I forgot to mention that she's going to say that Matt McCabe actually went back into the car. So remember, this is after, according to the Commonwealth, John O'Keefe's body is lying there on the front lawn. And Matt McCabe is going to have three chances to see it. The first time out of the house, now he goes back to get his jacket, comes back into the car, and then the third time is when he's driving away. Okay, but now she's just testifying that that's actually what he did. Came to the car, shoot, I forgot my jacket, went back to 34 Fairview inside the house, got his jacket, and came back out to the car. But now let's listen to what the peanut butter and bread were doing there.
And then I believe myself and or Julie turned around just kind of looking, and we saw a lone loaf of bread in the third row. So one of us said something to Jen about the loaf of bread, which she had gotten because of the storm. And
so she had gotten it because of the storm. So according to Sarah Levenson, the reason why Jennifer McCabe got that bread was because the storm was coming. So I guess she wanted to have some bread in the car. I don't know. Or maybe she wanted the bread in the home because she didn't want to go out the next day to battle the storm to get some bread. So that's Sarah Levenson's testimony, not because she wanted bread in her car because her kids are always flying around to different sports events. So again, another inconsistency with the different stories here.
I believe Jen was turned around looking at us and said something along the lines of, does anyone want a peanut butter and jelly? Joking around.
Right. So according to them, it was Jennifer McCabe that was also, making some jokes to the girls about peanut butter and bread and jelly and the bread. Okay. So that was another part of Sarah Levenson's testimony. Okay. Excuse me. So let's move on. So then she said that Julie Nagel said something as they were passing by the flagpole. And that's the extent of the testimony. Now, I think we're going to hear from Julie Nagel later that she saw some sort of black object, which we are supposed to understand to be John O'Keefe. Okay, but now this is the first time we're going to be hearing that maybe somebody in the car saw something and even made a mention of it. But that was the extent of her testimony. She remembers Julie saying something. Okay. And but again, she herself, Sarah Levenson, didn't notice anybody, didn't notice John O'Keefe, didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. All right, then cross-examination. So in cross-examination, Alan Jackson brought out the fact that, number one, she's a very long-time friend of Brian Albert Jr., and she knows the extended Brian Albert family very well. And despite all of her interactions with Brian Albert over the years, many, many years that they were together and friendly with each other, she never met the dog. She never met the dog, Chloe. And the reason, according to Alan Jackson, that she wanted to bring out during cross-examination, although there was an objection to this, was that the reason why she never met the dog was because the dog is not good with strangers. So he wanted to establish that, although there was an objection, and the objection was sustained. All right, well, he still mentioned it, so it could be the jury's thinking about it. Well, moving on. She said he brought out again the fact that she was looking down at her shoes, and she didn't see John O'Keefe at all. And he did say that the yard was relatively lit by the lights in the windows and the outside lights, and still she was not able to see John O'Keefe. So also he brought up the fact that in October of 2022 was the first time that she was contacted by Michael Proctor for an interview. So this is someone who's in the house and not contacted until October of 2022 for their first interview. Okay, and also he brought out the fact that she spoke to somebody before she went to that interview by Proctor. Before she had that interview with Proctor, she spoke to Julie Albert. So she did speak to somebody before the interview. I think it was Julie Albert. I'm not sure if it was Julie Nagel or Julie Albert. I may be missing that up, but she did speak to somebody, either Julie Albert or Julie Nagel, before the interview. Okay. I think she just said Julie, so I'm not 100% sure. So you can all put in the comments whether it was Julie Albert or Julie Nagel. Okay, and then on redirect, Hank Brennan just wanted to point out that the fact that the lights from the house do not illuminate the area all the way by the flagpole. To say like it's not completely lit up over there where you can see what's going on. Okay, but still, this is going to be one of the problems of the case, that no one leaving that house ever saw the 6'2" man lying there in the snow. And there was not a blizzard yet where he would have been covered by snow. So this is going to be one of the big problems for the Commonwealth in this case. Okay, moving on now to Katie Mclofflin. Now, Katie Mclofflin was one of the paramedics who responded to the scene. Okay, so right away she establishes on direct examination that they did not put their sirens on. The only reason why you have sirens on is if you need to move traffic, but in the middle of a blizzard, there's no traffic, so you don't really need to put on your sirens at 5 o'clock in the morning. So they did have their lights on, and she spoke to Karen Reed and asked if any trauma was caused by these, if any trauma caused these injuries. Okay, so John O'Keefe's lying there, and Karen Reed is the one that's running around going hysterical and crazy. And she actually has a conversation with Katie Mclofflin. And this is one of the issues of the case, because Katie Mclofflin says that I wanted to find out as a paramedic, what was the cause of these injuries, right? That's what you want to know. If you're treating this person, you want to know what the cause of the injuries are. And especially so that you can report to the next person. You report to the ER, the attending physician, what was the cause of these injuries so they can better treat this person, right? So she understood this, which we're going to get back to at the end of this, end of her testimony, but she understood how important it was. And therefore, she asked Karen Reed, what was the trauma that caused this? And this was Karen Reed's response. I hit him 2 times. Okay? So now, remember that we heard already from Timothy Nuttall, who is another paramedic, when his story was that Karen Reed came over to him while he was doing CPR, and he said, do you know this man? And her response was, not yes or no or maybe so. Her response was, I hit him 3 times. Okay, now we're getting to when she's talking to Katie Mclofflin, and Katie said, Karen Reed said, I hit him twice. Then Jennifer McCabe interjected into the conversation, trying to calm her down and saying, what are you talking about? And then she repeated again, Karen Reed, I hit him a 3rd time. Then there was a police officer who was around that area, which was Officer Sarif. And the police officer asked, hey, what did you just say? And she repeated, I hit him. So that's 4 times. And then Officer Sarif told somebody, go get Goody, referring to Sergeant Good. Okay, so that is Katie Mclofflin's story. Next. Still, Jennifer McCabe was still around the area, trying to calm her down, saying that she's hysterical. And that was it. She didn't follow up with any more questions. That was enough information for Katie Mclofflin. So what did she do with this information? Well, of course, as a paramedic, you repeat this information to your other paramedics. So she came inside the ambulance and she repeated the information to the other paramedics there, Nuttall and Flamati. Now, she also said that she didn't recognize the home of 34 Fairview initially, and then later she realized that one of her not such close friends, Caitlin Albert, happened to live there. Now, who is Caitlin Albert? Well, Caitlin Albert went to high school together. They're in the same grade. They have mutual friends. They're in different friend groups, but together they sometimes do things together. But she doesn't have a close personal relationship with Caitlin Albert. And even since this event, she does not remember seeing or talking to Caitlin Albert. Okay, and then something else that she noticed was that John O'Keefe was missing a sneaker. Okay, so that was really the extent of Katie Mclofflin. Yeah, there's a lot more background information, but that's really the important part of what she testified to. Now, cross-examination, the first thing that Alan Jackson wanted to point out is that you really wanted to know what happened, right? That's important for you to know what happened to this patient. right? And it's important to relay to others what happened. And because it's so important, it's important to relay that information and also to document it, right? Because we're going to know that this phrase that Karen Reed said, and these people are testifying that she said, I hit him, is not documented anywhere. It's not in police reports. It's not in the grand jury transcript from we saw. And it's not in medical records. So let's see what she says about this. So this was just interesting because, when you have sometimes a combative witness and you can kind of show the jury how the witness is always fighting with you no matter what you say. You're not even asking about anything specific. You're just saying in general, and still in general, they're trying to fight with you on different things. And the jury picks up that this is a person who's trying to fight with you and not being so forthcoming. So let's see what she has to say about this specific question about whether it's generally a good idea to document those type of things.
In doing so, it's important to relay that information to others as well. You would agree with that, correct?
Yes.
That's the whole point, Ms. Mclofflin. You want to gather the information and then let others know exactly what happened, document that as best you possibly can so that the life-saving efforts or the medical assistance can continue for the patient, correct?
Yeah, you have to share the information that you got with the people who are providing care.
And one of the ways you do that is by writing it down, correct?
No.
So you hear that? One of the ways, and again, it's a very general question. One of the ways to relay information is by writing it down, right? And she said no. So again, this is a type of question where I'm not asking you specifically if you did it in this case or if you felt it's important in this case. We're not even there yet. I'm just asking in general. Do you think it's a general good idea to, if you want to relay information to number one, yes, sure, certainly say it over verbally, but then also number two, to write it down? That also might be a good idea. So you could say, yeah, sure. Generally, maybe it would be a good idea. In this case, I don't think it was necessary, or I don't think it was important, or I didn't. You could do that. But when you see right away, immediately there's going to be friction with this witness, the jury can pick up on that. So that's just something I think also that you saw right away from the cross-examination. Okay, now she did say again, this is one of the themes also that Alan Jackson always asks the witnesses, did you prepare? What did you do to prepare today? Did you meet with Mr. Brennan? Did you meet with Lieutenant Tully and the witness advocate? Who did you speak to? What did you speak to? So he went through that with Caitlin Mclofflin, and they went through the fact that she watched her previous testimony. And he said to her that I'm going to ask you about your relationship with Caitlin Albert, because this was an interesting point. In the first trial, the direct examination, Mr. Lally, when he was doing it, he didn't bring up this information. He didn't bring it out in his direct examination. It was only brought up by cross-examination by Alan Jackson. But this time around, Hank Brennan's got a little smart, and therefore he brought it out in direct examination. So he asked her, Caitlin Mclofflin, did Mr. Brennan tell you that this is what he's going to talk to you about? He's going to bring out your relationship, or whatever you want to call it, with Caitlin Albert. And she said, yeah, that is something that he spoke about, but he didn't give a reason why he was going to do that. So another thing that Alan Jackson pointed out is that you never told Proctor about your relationship with Caitlin Albert, or if you have one at all. And then also he brought out the fact that if you're telling me that Officer Saraf heard her say, I hit him. He didn't arrest him. She didn't arrest her. He didn't even put that down in any report. All he did was say, get Goody over here. Which again, in Saraf's report, it doesn't say that Karen Reed said that. And he was standing right there. So again, another question about this case, that if she really did say these words, why doesn't it appear in any sort of report, especially if there's an officer sitting right there where a person could have confessed? That's essentially what the prosecutors are arguing, that Karen Reed confessed to the crime by saying, I hit him. And that confession didn't make it to any sort of report. It's a big question in this case. So that's what he brought out also. Now, another thing that he pointed out on cross-examination was that Katie Mclofflin was saying that Karen Reed was so upset and hysterical. She was overly frantic and almost hysterical. So here's where you have to be careful, because what Alan Jackson did here was to impeach her. He showed the dash cam where Karen Reed at that time was very calm. She did not look like she was jumping around and flailing her arms and running back and forth and pacing and screaming. It doesn't look like that from the video at all. From the dash cam, it looks like she was actually having a normal conversation for the first time. Like in all the other reports and dash cams, you're watching her walk all over the place, and she's holding her head and she's holding her mouth, and you see her not being able to control herself. That actually, she looks hysterical. It just happens to be that at the time that she's talking to Katie Mclofflin, she seems to have very good composure of herself. And here you're writing in your report that she was almost hysterical and she was overly frantic. So she tried to say, well, you can't really tell from the video. And Alan Jackson said, well, I think you could tell from the video. You see it. But so that was interesting. And he also pointed out the fact that actually the person who was more active was actually Jennifer McCabe. She was flaying her arms much more than Karen Reed was. Okay. And then he pointed out the fact that you actually told Flamati and Nuttall when you were in the ambulance, meaning when Karen Reed actually told you this, Flamati and Nuttall weren't anywhere near you. They were in the ambulance. And then when you went in the ambulance, you told them what Karen Reed told you. So essentially what he's trying to do here, Alan Jackson, is trying to show that really what we heard from Nuttall wasn't his own recollection. It was him repeating over what Katie Mclofflin told him when he was in the ambulance. Now, still, the jury can be thinking very reasonably that no, she actually said it a few times. She said it once to Nuttall when he was on the ground doing CPR. And then again, she told it over to Katie Mclofflin, then who later told the Flamati and Nuttall in the ambulance. So that still could be what they're thinking, but still, Alan Jackson brought that point out. Now, also, another point that he brought out in cross-examination was the fact that in the first trial, and again, they're not allowed to say trial, but in the first proceeding, when he said on May 3rd, you were asked on cross-examination, who is Caitlin Albert? And her response was, I went to high school with someone named Caitlin Albert. Okay, which you don't have to be a body expert out there to understand from that answer that, or a word expert, whatever they call these people, expression experts, whatever, that she's obviously trying to create some distance. Yeah, I went to high school with a person named Caitlin Albert, right? So she's obviously trying to put some distance there. Now you're saying that you would be considered somewhat friends, not really close friends, and you guys hang out together, although you don't hang out together just one-on-one, but it's with other groups. And in fact, he brings out a lot of other points of the fact that, number one, her best friend actually lived with Caitlin Albert in an apartment in college, and she used to visit them at the apartment in college. So this is not like someone who, oh yeah, I went to high school like 20 years ago with somebody. I don't really see them anymore. You'd see them all the time, in fact. So, so this is what he was trying to bring out, that you were initially trying to create such a distance between you and Caitlin Albert, but in fact, you attended a baby shower, you went to other social events. There's many photographs of you together, you and Caitlin Albert. Now, again, not just them together, but in a group of friends. Okay. Then they brought up the fact that he was trying to get her to admit that Kevin Albert was the one who set up her interview with Proctor and Buchanan. Now, she was not giving in on this at all, and she kept saying that no, she didn't speak to Kevin Albert at all, and she has no idea who set up the police interview with Proctor. So she was pretty strong about that, and I don't think Alan Jackson really got anywhere with that line of questioning. Then moving on, he was trying to explain also how the scene was so chaotic, and it's possible that during a chaotic scene with everyone screaming and running around, and this is her first homicide case that she's actually responding to, despite being a paramedic for so long, but this was her first homicide. Well, I shouldn't say for so long, but despite being a paramedic for a number of years, this was the first homicide that she responded to, and it was very chaotic. It was very loud, and she never heard her say, "Could I have hit him? Did I hit him?" And people can get things wrong when the scene is chaotic. Now, also the fact that she did not take any notes. Now, she's not the one. Well, she wrote on her glove actually some details about John O'Keefe, but that was the extent of her notes, and then she destroyed that note. So she said that she's really not in charge of writing the report. This is really for the lead paramedic to write. And again, in their report, it doesn't say anything about Karen Reed admitting or confessing that she actually hit him. Now, there's another part, which is really what we're going to get to, and that is the fact that she kind of agreed that it's important for a paramedic to know what the cause of the injuries are. This is kind of going back to the beginning of the cross-examination. It is important for a paramedic to know, as it's important for any medical professional to know what caused these injuries, right? So at one point she says that it's important for me to know. So it kind of is my job. But then on the other hand, she said, but I didn't want to follow up with any more questions about why, like when she just says, I hit him, what does that mean? You hit him. You hit him with what? So this was actually brought out by none other than Hank Brennan. This wasn't even brought out on cross-examination. So listen to some of this testimony right here, where she's talking about not following up with what does it mean that Karen Reed hit him? Hit him with what? So let's see what happens here. Give me 1 second. Here we go.
Why didn't you persist in getting more information from the defendant when she said, I hit him, I hit him?
So his question was, why didn't you persist on getting more information when she said, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him?
I felt bad for her at the time. It was a very disturbing scene, and I did not want to push further down that road. It's not my job, and I didn't feel comfortable doing it.
So it's not her job. And what she was trying to say here, this also was brought out, that it's not her job because this is the job of a police officer to do an investigation of, if somebody is committing a crime. But again, the problem here is that it is your job as a paramedic to know what the cause of the injury is. So you felt confident enough, and you didn't feel too bad to ask the question initially. I mean, you come to the scene, you see that Karen Reed's going crazy. You see that she's running around all nuts. You see that she's hysterical. You still felt that it was important to ask this question. And you see they're having a pretty calm conversation if you look at the video. So you know that it's your job to get the cause of the injury. You know that's your job. That's why you asked. What happened? What was the cause? Was this because of some sort of trauma? And then when she says, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him, you don't follow up with what? What did you hit him with? Did you hit him with a baseball bat? Did you hit him with a golf club? Did you hit him with your car? Did you scratch him? Like, what does it mean that you hit him? Such a vague and ambiguous and unclear statement. So at that point, she says, or Hank Brennan's trying to get her to say it, which what she does say is that, well, that's not my job. It's not my job to determine, her criminal culpability. But that really wasn't really the question. As a paramedic, your job really is to get to the bottom of the information. And it seems from the conversation they were having a normal conversation at the time. Again, she testifies that no, she was also upset at the time. But okay, I mean, who's not going to be upset anytime that you respond to any of these sort of situations and it's someone's boyfriend who's going through this? And you got to get the information as best as you could. So it wasn't the greatest excuse. And I think that the jury could be thinking, you could have followed up a little bit more with that question. Okay, but is that going to take away from the fact, well, meaning the jury could also be thinking very simply, okay, maybe she didn't do her job properly, but still she heard those statements. I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. Okay, so, but again, these are statements that don't appear in any sort of medical record or report at all. So that point is still going to be a point that Alan Jackson can argue in closing. And he can just say, look, these people mixed it up. They thought that she said it, but she didn't really say it. She was just saying, could I have hit him? Maybe I hit him. Did I hit him? And because of the chaos of the scene, she decided that she's actually said, I hit him. Anyway, fine, moving on. Next, we had Paul Gallagher. Now, Paul Gallagher, he was a lieutenant at the Canton Police Department. And he was really a big part of this investigation. He was the superior officer at this investigation. He came to 34 Fairview. Now, he came after already General Keefe was taken off, but initially he thought that the call was for 1 Meadows. And then eventually he found out that no, actually it was 34 Fairview. Now, of course, Hank Brennan brings out that you didn't have your sirens on. Of course not, we didn't have our sirens on. And he arrives on the scene. General Keefe is already gone. He's been already taken to the hospital, Good Samaritan Hospital. And at the time, he didn't think that this was a crime scene. He thought that maybe General Keefe had some sort of medical episode. How was he supposed to know? He's just arriving on the scene, and maybe this is just a medical episode. But still, out of the abundance of caution, he still wanted to process the scene. And one of the questions that he was asked was, how hard was the ground? And this was objected to, but Judge Canoni allowed him to answer. And he didn't say hard as a rock. That I think we're still going to hear from an expert. But what he did say was it was frozen. Okay, so maybe that's okay to say that the ground was frozen. Now, he didn't use a shovel to kind of process the scene to try to pick up some evidence because he didn't want to break anything, just in case there's something there to be broken. So what he decided to use was a leaf blower. Now, why would he have this idea in his mind to use a leaf blower? Have you ever seen anybody in the winter using a leaf blower? Well, he said that he has seen it being used before to remove light layers of snow. So that's where he got this idea from. So he says, this would be the perfect situation to use a leaf blower. So he sent Sergeant Good to go get a leaf blower to clean off some areas of snow so that he can actually see what's underneath the snow. See if there's any evidence there. And he said that it was very successful. It was very successful using this leaf blower. He recommends it in the future. And it's a good idea to use a leaf blower when you need to. So that's what he did. And still, even though he had no reason to believe that this was a crime scene, but he still, out of the abundance of caution, he still felt that it was imperative to collect some blood samples. Now, what did he do in order to collect the blood samples is that he didn't have any vials on him. He didn't have any swabs on him. He didn't have any evidence bags on him. And so what he did is that he got these red Solo cups. Okay, red Solo cups. And he got a Stop and Shop bag. Now, what was interesting on cross-examination is that he said that he doesn't even know where he got the Stop and Shop bag from. Somehow it just ended up in his hands. And he said, hey, look at this. I have a Stop and Shop bag. I may as well put these red Solo cups in the Stop and Shop bag. But okay. So let's try to not make light out of this. All right. So now he takes the red Solo cups and he collects the blood with these red Solo cups and he puts them in the Stop and Shop bag. And he says that he's got Sergeant Good videotaping, not the red Solo cups, but he does have him videotaping him using the leaf blower to show everybody how effective this is. Okay, and then while he's doing that, he does discover a cocktail glass, which is broken. So he finds that because of his leaf blowing efforts. Now, eventually, he does get it into the evidence locker, but he doesn't know how it actually got there. Okay, so he doesn't recall who put it there. He's not sure about the chain of custody when it comes to that. All he knows is that he collected it, but he doesn't know exactly how it ended up in the evidence locker. But once it was in the evidence locker, then he already took over the chain of command and the chain of custody, and he did pass it over to the lab after that. So that was his job, but who got from the scene to the evidence locker, that we're not sure. Okay, so now after 8 a.m., he returns to the Canton Police Department, and he gets a call. Actually, Sergeant Link gets a call that they need to go back to Fairview because Jennifer McCabe remembered some very important information. So they go back to 34 Fairview, and that is when Sergeant Link goes and meets with Jennifer McCabe, because that's when Jennifer McCabe had this epiphany that she forgot to tell the cops that actually Karen Reed said in an affirmative statement, I hit him. Now, when he didn't, again, Paul Gallagher didn't meet with Jennifer McCabe, but he met with Brian Albert. So Brian Albert answered the side door. Now, this is interesting because he mentioned that he does have something called suspicious activity training. And this is training where you're able to determine whether someone is acting suspiciously. So like if he crosses his arms or if his eyes are darting around. So he has this suspicious activity training, and he didn't see anything out of the ordinary from Brian Albert. Brian Albert was not acting suspiciously at all. So, but the Sergeant Link went into the kitchen to speak to Jennifer McCabe. All right. And he also, looking around the house, he didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. Everything looked completely fine. So they left after coming back to 34 Fairview. They left, and then they went back to Canton Police Department. And at that point, state police were going to respond to the hospital. They were going to take over the investigation. And he had a meeting with the chief, and they decided to recuse themselves because their best detective, a detective by the name of Kevin Albert, their best detective was the brother of Brian Albert, and therefore, out of an abundance of caution, again, they didn't want to have anything to do with this investigation anymore. So they recused themselves from the investigation. Eventually, the Lexus, as we know, made it to Canton Police Department, the Sallyport, and remained there from January 29th to February 1st. And eventually, Massachusetts State Police came February 1st, and they were provided access to the vehicle. Okay, so that was the extent of the direct examination for Paul Gallagher. Then cross-examination began. And the first thing that Alan Jackson established was that let's talk about who was actually at the scene. Okay, you're the lead officer, you're the superior, so everyone has to answer to you. You're there. So who else was there? We got Sergeant Link, you got Good, Officer Good, Sergeant Good, Mulaney, and Seraph. And you weren't interviewed until April 3rd, 2024. That's when you met with Proctor. Or you met with the prosecutor, met with Proctor. Okay. And he tried to also say that he doesn't even know that Proctor is the lead investigator in this case. So he tried to right away fight that Michael Proctor is not the lead investigator. Okay. And he also says that he didn't write a report about the scene at all. Now, this is where it gets a little bit interesting, because when you're the superior, when you're the senior officer there, and you just have a supervisory role, so then you don't generally write the report because you're just supervising everybody else. So as long as they do what they're supposed to be doing, they write the reports. So this is what he was arguing back. Alan Jackson was saying, did you write any report about this? And he said, no, I don't write the report. I'm the supervisor. But then he said, yeah, but you weren't just doing supervisory activities, were you? You were actually doing the investigation. You were the one with the leaf blower. You were the one that detected and found this broken glass. So if you're the one who's actually actively doing the investigation, don't you think that you should be the one writing the report? Nevertheless, he said, no, I didn't write the report. Sergeant Link actually was the one who wrote the report. He also said that there was no diagram that he wrote about where he found the glass, exactly what the coordinates were, or where he found the blood spots. None of that was done. So now, another thing that he brought out was the fact that Sergeant Link and Sergeant Good and himself, they never saw John O'Keefe in the lawn. They were directed by other people to where John O'Keefe was lying in the lawn, but they never themselves actually saw John O'Keefe in the lawn. And then when Proctor came to the scene, who was there to show him where John O'Keefe lay was Paul Gallagher. So Paul Gallagher was just told by somebody else about where he was, and he never actually saw him in the snow. And that was another point that Alan Jackson wanted to point out, that you have the blind leading the blind here, essentially. And when the CARS unit came out also, who was there to show them? Again, people that were never actually saw John O'Keefe's body there. They didn't know where his head was. They didn't know where his arms were. They didn't know where his legs were. Nothing like that. Nobody there who was directing the CARS unit or Proctor actually saw John O'Keefe's body there. So again, it's like the blind leading the blind. So he also said that Seraph never told him about Karen Reed's statements of I hit him. Now, also, the fact that he pointed out is that 34 Fairview is about 1.5 miles from Canton Police Department. Okay, it's not that far of a drive. It's pretty close. 1.5 miles. Now, why did you think to collect this blood with solo cups? Why didn't you send an officer back to the Canton Police Department and get swabs, get evidence bags? Do it the right way. Why didn't you do that? So he said, because it was an emergency situation. And in an emergency situation, there's a blizzard going on. We don't have time to waste. It can ruin the scene. The scene can be corrupted. And then I won't be able to preserve anything from the scene. So therefore, because it was such an emergency, I decided to use solo red cups. But he said, in response to this, Alan Jackson said, yeah, but you sent Sergeant Good to go get a leaf blower. So you're already wasting some time getting a leaf blower. Why don't you send somebody, maybe Link, back to the Canton Police Department? It's only 1.5 miles away. I know it's a blizzard. Okay, so it'll add a few minutes, but then you actually are able to preserve and collect this evidence the right way. So he said, no, it wasn't an option. He can't send anybody back there. It was an emergency. They had to collect the blood immediately, and that's what they did. And then this is maybe one of my favorite parts of the cross-examination, because, I mean, there's a lot of parts that just had me laughing because of how serious Paul Gallagher was being about all these techniques. It was just hard because I wasn't sure if he was being sarcastic or serious, but he was being serious. But anyway, so let's move on to where he says about the solo cups, because this is just, I mean, the seriousness in which he delivers this line, I mean, this is just phenomenal. I mean, this is absolutely phenomenal how he's able to deliver this line with no sense of irony at all. Okay, watch this.
During that scene.
So you saw pink stains in the snow, correct?
That's correct.
And you said, Officer Good, probably called Sean, Sarge, go home and get a leaf blower.
That is correct.
Could have said, Officer Mulaney, get your butt over to Canton PD and pick up 10 swabs, correct?
He wouldn't have had access to the swabs.
Oh, so now
He's trying to say about going back to the swabs. Now he's saying, he wouldn't have access to the swabs. So he's trying to come up with other excuses. Well, it's not just an emergency, but it's also because he didn't have access to the swabs. So Alan Jackson's going to play with this a little bit before we get to the solo cups. So let's just play this a little bit, and then we'll get to the solo cups part.
one of your officers could have gotten swabs, even if the lieutenant, the ranking lieutenant had dispatched him to go get a swab.
Because he doesn't have access to the BCI, the office of BCI, where our stuff is kept.
Did you make a phone call?
No, nobody there would have had access at that time. It was only Officer Dever on the desk.
So you're the only person that could have gotten those swabs?
Sergeant Lane could have gotten them as well.
So Sergeant Lane could have too?
Sure.
Right. So Sergeant Link could have gotten it. Okay. So you could have sent Sergeant Link.
But you didn't send it.
No, definitely didn't.
Okay.
No, I was not going to send Sergeant Link.
What you did do, however, is you went to the neighbor's house. Happened to be Tom Keller, right?
The lieutenant of detectives, yes.
And Lieutenant Gallagher gave you red solo cups.
Yes. I asked for plastic or glass containers. He had solo cups, and I utilized them.
Now watch how he delivers this next line. I mean, this is really, I mean, this is special. I mean, if you can deliver this line with this straight face, I mean, hats off. Because this is just, I mean, I was on the floor. But here we go.
The same kind of solo cups that we all see at backyard barbecues.
Yep, they hold liquid terrifically.
Come on, I challenge anyone, ask these questions, and then say they hold liquid terrifically. I mean, without breaking up. I mean, come on. That's just special. I mean, that's really, really special. Okay. And then he got to the fact that the Stop and Shop bags, one of the things that Paul Gallagher testified to is that essentially the Stop and Shop bag is the same thing as an evidence bag. It's really the same thing. The only difference is that evidence bags cost a little bit more money. So, so I'm sorry. I'm just having, so he says it's really the same thing. So Alan Jackson said they're really the same thing. There's no difference between a Stop and Shop bag and an evidence bag. Don't evidence bags come from manufacturers specifically made sure that they're ready to collect evidence and that they're not contaminated and they're not, messed up in some other way? There's got to be some reason that you're paying that extra money for it. So he eventually got him to admit that, yeah, they may be a little bit different than a Stop and Shop bag. And then he also finally finished off the fact that there's no evidence of there's no evidence logs. So all these logs that they're supposed to be there, who's touching the blood, who's touching the solo cups, who's touching the pieces of glass. There's no evidence log of any of that. And that's another part that he brought up before he finished for the day. So that was just it for the day. There's going to be more cross-examination tomorrow on Paul Gallagher. So, but if you had to rewatch any part of this trial at this stage, I would definitely tell you to watch the entire direct and cross-examination of Paul Gallagher, because I mean, some of these lines, he just delivers it like so straight, matter of fact, straight face, serious. And it's just unique. It's really special. What else can I say? Okay, well, that's going to be it for today. That was day 9. We'll see you all here back day 10, starting tomorrow, 9 a.m. for the live stream. If you haven't yet, please subscribe, like, and we will see you next time.